Hi, greetings, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. Trekkies and Trekkers. And hey, guess what? It's September, and you know what that means? That's right. It's Star Trektember 2023, and this month we're going to be taking a look at season 4 of Star Trek: Deep Space Nine. Oh yeah! So let's kick things off with the very first episode, "The Way of the Warrior," which is a two-parter. But like I said, I'm basically putting both parts into one video. So after this, we'll be looking at the other episodes and stuff like that. So there you go. So yeah. So anyway, let's get things started. The Deep Space Nine crew hunts a changeling through the space station. Using wide-angle phaser sweeps, Captain Benjamin Sisko Major Kieran Reese chases the changeling to the promenade, where Stellium resumes humanoid shape and grabs hold of Dr. Julian Bashir after emerging from the promenade directory. It is Odo, and the chase was really just a surprise drill. Kira asked the computer how much time it took to catch Odo. 3 hours and 27 minutes is the answer. Odo laments that duration isn't good enough, noting how any founder would have a field day with the station in that length of time, culminating in Bashir's death. The staff is then dismissed with the warning scan anything and everything next time, giving the other founders increased proclivity for shape-shifting. Another random drill scheduled, and an offer from Quark to take bets on how long the staff will take to catch Odo is rebuffed. That night, Cassidy Yates joins Sisko for a romantic dinner. She remarks that there must have been some changes in Deep Space Nine. Firstly, Sisko has shaved his head, of which Yates approves. Secondly, there has been a lot of maintenance done on the station lately. Sisko is secretive, but hints that the crew is preparing a few surprises in case the Dominion decides to attack the station. The recent revelations that changelings have infiltrated the Alpha Quadrant has caused a large amount of unrest, and the Cardassians have responded by sealing their borders. The couple present each other with gifts. Sisko gives Cassidy a garment made from rare Tholian silk, while Cassidy has returned the gesture by handing Sisko Pike City Pioneer's baseball cap from Sistas 3. Their dinner is interrupted when the new Klingon flagship, the IKS Negvar, decloaks at the station. As commander, General Martok requests shore leave at Deep Space Nine. After Sisko agrees, the DS9 crew is amazed when an entire armada of Klingon ships decloaks around the station. Yeah, boy. In Quarks, the Ferengi bartender nervously opines with O'Brien and Bashir that the Klingons who have arrived are awfully quiet. When Martok meets with Captain Sisko Major Kira, he merely wants them to use his diktak to cut their palms, proving that they bleed and are therefore not changelings. When the Klingon is satisfied that Sisko and Kira are really who they appear to be, Martok explains that the Klingon fleet have been sent to fight alongside their Federation allies against the Dominion. Sisko appreciates the gesture, but isn't sure it's necessary, as their communications relay in the Gamma Quadrant hasn't detected any signs of Geminar activity for quite some time. But Martok insists that the Dominion will come, and the Klingons will remain in Bajoran space to counter the inevitable attack. The DS9 crew resumes regular duties, despite the fact that the station's complement now includes countless Klingons. Kira and Jadzia Dax visit the holosuite, which recreates the Hubishan Basson Trail. Kira is distracted away from the holograms and impressed with them, admitting that she has never had much of an imagination. Odo and Garrick have a quiet breakfast on the Repomad, where worried Garrick reveals that, since the destruction of Obsidian Order, he's heard rumors of civil uprisings on Cardassia. Their meal is interrupted when a group of Klingons cause more on the promenade. Odo breaks up the altercation, but the lead Klingon, Drex, levels strikes at both Garrick and Odo. Odo tells the group of Klingons to leave the promenade or be thrown in holding cell. Drex and his thugs later ambush and beat Garrick in his tailor shop. Uh-oh. As Bashir repairs Cardassian's broken bones, he states he is surprised that Garrick isn't pressing charges. Garrick, in his usual manner, brushes off the beating, but is wondering why Klingons have become so hostile to Cardassians. When Cassidy eats his freighter, the XS Zosha, sends a distress call, Sisko and the crew DS9 board the USS Defiant. Arriving at the Zosha's coordinates, they discover that Commander Kabuk of the Klingon bird of prey IKS Mchar is searching all vessels exiting Bajoran space for changelings, including the Zosha. When Sisko threatens Kabuk that the Defiant will open fire on the Mchar, the Klingon commander allows the Zosha to break free of the Mchar's tractor beam. Once the senior officers return to Deep Space Nine, Martok meets with Sisko again in his office, almost slamming to talk onto Cisco's desk and leaves. Dax explains the dagger belongs to K-Bach, and then Martok gave it to Cisco to let him know that he executed K-Bach as punishment for disobeying his orders. Cisco realized that something must be done now before the situation escalates out of control. Remembering how Curzon once told him that the only people who can really handle Klingons are other Klingons, Cisco notifies Starfleet Command of the situation, and Starfleet consequently dispatches Lieutenant Commander Worf to the station. Yay! Upon his arrival, Chief O'Brien welcomes his old crewmate aboard. A disgruntled Quark, however, upon seeing Worf, sarcastically remarks that precisely what the station needs is another Klingon. Worf immediately goes to see Captain Cisco to introduce himself and report for duty. When Worf meets the captain, Cisco offers condolences for the loss of the USS Enterprise D, calling it a good ship. Worf thanks Cisco for his condolences, but is quite uncomfortable discussing it. He confirms Cisco's understanding that he has been on extended leave at the Klingon monastery on Boreth. Cisco apologizes for interrupting Worf's leave, but Worf tells Cisco his leave is almost over. When Cisco asks where Worf will likely be assigned next, Worf admits he has been considering resigning from Starfleet. When asked why, Worf explains that living among humans for most of his life has never been easy for him, but that it has become even harder for him since the Enterprise was destroyed and that he's no longer sure of his place in Starfleet anymore. Cisco tells Worf that if he doesn't want the assignment, he will understand. But Worf tells Cisco that, until he decides one way or the other about resigning, he's going to do his duty. With that, Cisco gives Worf his assignment, to find out what the Klingons are up to. Before Worf leaves, Cisco cautions him that he too must consider resigning from Starfleet, but now believes that would have been the wrong choice. He urges the Klingon to consider his decision carefully, and Worf promises the captain he will keep that in mind. Worf ventures into Quark's, surprising the Ferengi by asking for prune juice over the traditional Klingon choice of blood wine. Chief O'Brien asks his old shipmate to join him and introduces him to Dr. Bashir and darts. Worf's first try at the sport ends with him throwing the dart halfway through the board. Then, Karen Dax emerges from the holosuite, dressed in bright, colorful, and extravagant medieval clothes, arguing with the Kira knocked out Sir Lancelot. O'Brien introduces Worf to the two, and while Kira is embarrassed and tries to explain the clothes, Dax is quite taken with him. Just then, Drex starts to stir up trouble, so Worf decides it's the perfect time to make his first attempt at finding out what the Klingons are up to. He picks a fight with Drex and takes the warriors to Tog. Drex's father, who happens to be General Martok, comes to Worf's quarters to demand the return of his son's honor. There, Worf voices his disappointment in Martok for the General's dishonorable tactics of harassing personnel and ships. But Martok vows that it is all in the Alpha Quadrant's best interests. Afterwards, Worf vents his frustration on a technical holosuite program. When Dax arrives, she challenges him to battle with Batleths. After a brief fight, Worf gains the upper hand and sweeps Dax off her feet. Dax returally asks whether the simulation made Worf feel better. Worf is frustrated at the situation, knowing that his contacts on the Klingon homeworld refuse to speak with him. Dax suggests that, with so many Klingons on the station, surely one of them owes the House of Mog a favor and might be willing to reveal the true reason they are there. Worf invites an old family friend, Klingon Officer Haraga, for a drink. When they consume a large quantity of blood wine and become drunk, Worf presses Haraga for information. Owing Worf's father, Mog, as Mog saved Haraga's life, Mog had saved Haraga's house during their feud with House of Duras, Haraga tells Worf all about the glorious battle that awaits them ahead. What Worf learns disturbs him, so much so that he hesitates to tell Cisco. Odo argues with Worf on the promenade and tells the Klingon that no matter what choice he makes, it is his duty to inform Cisco on which side he's on before it's too late. Worf decides to tell Cisco the ominous truth. The Klingons are about to attack Cardassia. The rumors are true. The Central Command has been overthrown by civilian resistance and power has been transferred to civilian authorities. The Klingons are convinced that changeling infiltrators are responsible, although they have no hard proof. But they are convinced that civilians couldn't have done it without outside help. In the war room, Cisco confronts Martok and demands that the Klingons call off their attack. Martok hints that Chancellor Gowron will be told all of Worf's involvement in covering the news of the planned attack. Worf himself feels guilty that he has essentially betrayed the Klingon Empire. When Cisco points out that Starfleet will never support an unprovoked invasion and the attack will place the Federation Klingons alliance in jeopardy, Martok claims he returned to his ship and consult with Gowron. However, once Martok beams aboard his ship, he sends a message to the Klingon fleet, ordering them to begin their attack. The fleet cloaks and warps away from the station, heading straight for Cardassia Prime. The crew of DS9 meets in the wardroom. The Federation Council has ordered them not to get involved until they speak with Gowron, a decision supported by the Bajoran government. Bajor asks if they are going to warn the Cardassians of the invasion. Dax points out that they would be betraying the Klingons by so doing. O'Brien wonders if the Klingons are correct and that the Dominion has indeed taken over the Cardassian government, to which Odo says this is how the founders would set about gaining control of Cardassia. Kira says that the Obsidian Order's destruction gave the Cardassian dissident movement the strength and momentum it needed to take over the government, without Dominion involvement. Worf points out that this is irrelevant. Many Klingons of the Empire believe that they have been at peace for too long and that the Empire must expand in order to survive. The looming Dominion threat has given them an excuse to attack and conquer. If the Klingons have returned to the old ways of conquest, Bajor, and potentially the Federation, are at risk and the crew need to do something to prevent that from happening. Sisko tries an unorthodox tactic. He invites Garrick to the wardroom to measure the Starfleet captain for a new suit. As Garrick works, the crew makes sure that Taylor overhears the fact that 1/3 of the Klingon military is currently heading into Cardassian space and will arrive within the hour. Garrick excuses himself and immediately afterwards returns to his shop to warn Gul Dukat. Busy fighting the civilian insurgency, the Cardassian Union is unprepared for a possible Klingon invasion. Later in Ops, Kira reports that the allied Cardassian colonies were overrun almost immediately by the Klingons. But now that the Cardassian fleet has been mobilized, the Klingons are meeting stronger resistance. Dax jokingly says that it's almost as if somebody warned the Cardassians they were coming. Kira then says it'll hopefully make the Klingons think twice about what they're doing. But Worf says that's unlikely as now the battle has begun. Martok and his troops settle for nothing less than victory. Just then, Sisko exits office with bad news. The Federation Council have decided to officially condemn the invasion, and in response, Gowron has expelled all Federation citizens from the Klingon Empire and recalled his ambassadors from the Federation. But that's not all he did. The Klingons have withdrawn from the Khitomer Accords. The Federation-Klingon alliance has been officially dissolved. Despite this, however, O'Brien reports that a Klingon ship has decloaked and requests permission to dock, claiming to have transferred Gowron on board, who wishes to personally speak with Worf. Get back here. There we go. Aboard the Klingon ship, Gowron happily greets Worf and tells him that, despite everything, he still considers him a friend and ally, and then tells Worf why he is there. He wants him to leave Starfleet and join the Klingons in the battle, which will give him a chance to redeem himself in the eyes of his people. Despite wanting to return to his people and knowing that he owes the Chancellor much for restoring his honor and giving Kurn a seat on the Klingon High Council, Worf refuses, telling Gowron that he will not break his oath to Starfleet, nor will he support an unwarranted attack. Enraged, Gowron warns Worf that, if he refuses, the House of Mog will be stripped of all his assets, Kurn will be removed from the High Council, and Worf himself will be exiled from the Klingon Empire left with nothing. Worf replies he'll still have his honor. Gowron simply says, "So be it." Later, Worf sits in Quark's, deep in thought, and is joined by O'Brien. After reminiscing over how they saved Captain Picard from the Borg, and how Worf knew they would succeed despite the overwhelming odds, he says he has decided to resign. O'Brien tries to convince him otherwise, assuring Worf that Starfleet is sure to build another Enterprise soon. But as far as Worf is concerned, the ship and the life he knew are gone. As he cannot return to Bareth and feels that his son is much happier living on Earth, Worf decides to apply for a commission with the distant cruiser fleet at the Nyberide Alliance. Believing he is a liability to Captain Sisko's dealing with the Klingons, he asks Sisko to accept his resignation, but Sisko refuses. Starfleet needs Worf now more than ever before. Indeed, word soon arrives that the Klingons have broken through the Cardassian fleet. Sisko contacts the new Cardassian government, the Depata Council, only to see the face of Dukat. Apparently, Dukat switched sides when it was clear that the coup would succeed. Sisko devises a plan. If Dukat can get the Council on his ship and rendezvous with the Defiant, they can seek refuge on Deep Space Nine. Since the Klingons will execute all government officials in their invasion of Cardassia, Dukat agrees. Worf points out that, if Martok is correct, and members of the Depata Council have been replaced by changelings, then the Defiant will help them escape. Sisko considers it a risk worth taking. Knowing the Klingons may end up attacking the station, he orders the new weapon systems to be checked and a partial evacuation of the civilian population. On his way to the airlock, Sisko runs into Cassidy, who just got back an hour ago. The two muse how lousy their timing has been, but share their first kiss. Aww. Sisko, Dex, Bashir, and Worf take the cloak Defiant toward the rendezvous point. Worf admits he feels strange being on Federation starship with the cloaking device, but Sisko assures him he'll get used to it. Bashir reminds Sisko that their agreement with the Romulans regarding the cloaking device strictly forbids it in use in the Alpha Quadrant. Sisko is aware of this, but also knows there are probably countless Klingon ships between them. Dukat and he want to make it to the rendezvous in one piece. In response, Bashir tells Sisko he will not say anything if he doesn't, to which Sisko replies with a subtle wink. Later, the Defiant comes across a debris field of Cardassian ships destroyed by the Klingon invaders. Although there may be survivors, the only Defiant is decloaking the Defiant to use the main sensors. Worf advises against it, warning there are probably Klingon ships cloaked and lying in wait. When Bashir argues that doesn't sound very honorable, Worf replies that, to Klingons, in war there is nothing more honorable than winning. Despite the chance of survivors and over Bashir's objection, Sisko knows making the rendezvous is more important and decides not to take the risk. The Defiant arrives at the coordinates. They find 3 Klingon birds of prey are in the vicinity and are attacking the Cardassian cruiser, Prakesh. When the Klingons ignore the Defiant's hails and fire the first shot, the starship targets the lead bird of prey and seriously damages engines. The Prakesh shields, weapons and engines obliterated, Sisko is left with no choice but to drop the Defiant shields and transport Dukat and the Council off their impaired vessel. He also decides to err on the side of caution in order that they undergo blood screenings. Sisko gambles the Defiant's ablative armor will be sufficient against the attacks from the bird of prey. The Defiant begins firing at will and destroys a single Klingon vessel in the process. When larger Vorcha-class attack cruiser joins the melee, Worf uses technical experience and suggests the use of a modulated tractor beam to deflect some of the Klingon disruptor fire. The Defiant crew is successful in rescuing all the Depata Council members, while the Defiant's cloaking device has been damaged. The Defiant flies to maximum warp as Prakesh explodes, and 2 Klingon vessels follow the starship. Meanwhile, Bashir has examined all the Council members, including Dukat, and determined that no one aboard is a changeling. The Defiant successfully reaches Deep Space Nine, where O'Brien detects the pursuing Klingon ships. As the Defiant approaches the station, the crew detects several dozen Klingon ships. O'Brien has requested reinforcements from Starfleet Command, but the relief task force, under the command of Admiral Hastur, has not yet reached the station. Sisko makes the decision to sound battle stations. The DS-9 crew man their battle stations, preparing for the Klingons to attack, while civilians are evacuated off the promenade, including Ruktik Quark, who wanted to defend his bar with his disruptor pistol, often the ROM as cannibalized it for a replicator repair. The Depata Council are sequestered away by Dukat and, unexpectedly, Garrick, who raises a Cardassian disruptor to fight alongside Dukat. Martok and Gowron hail the station and offer an ultimatum: surrender the Cardassian officials, or the Klingons will take the Council members by force. Even when Sisko tells the 2 Klingons that the counselors have all been given blood screenings and confirmed to not be changelings, Martok and Gowron remain determined to conquer Cardassia. Gowron urges Sisko to surrender, claiming the old station is as defenseless as a toothless old Grishnar cat. To which Sisko confidently replies with assurance that the old cat may not be as toothless as Gowron thinks it is. Due to the Dominion threat, Deep Space Nine has been given some major tactical upgrades. The station is now equipped with more than 5,000 photon torpedoes ready to fire. Nevertheless, Gowron ushers in the prospect of battle by declaring in Klingon Chaos' battle cry, "Today is a good day to die." The Klingon fleet begins their attack. When the Klingon fleet enters weapons range, DS9 unleashes several volleys of the station's new armaments, with multiple phaser banks and telescoping photon torpedo launchers The station destroys ship after ship. Furious, Gowron orders the Nigvar to fire his cannons directly at DS9's shield generators. The station's defensive systems fail, and Klingon boarding parties beam into Ops, the Promenade, and the Cardassians' quarters. After a series of firefights and fierce hand-to-hand combat, the DS9 crew managed to regain control of the situation. An injured O'Brien restores the shields, and Dax announces the arrival of the Starfleet reinforcements, 6 ships led by the USS Venture. Gowron has little choice but to retreat. He requires one final threat. You have side against us in battle, and this we do not forgive or forget. Captain's Log, Stardate 49011.4. Gowron has returned to the Klingon homeworld and his task force has withdrawn from Majoran space. I don't know if I can fully express the pride I've felt at seeing how well Deep Space Nine and his crew weathered this latest crisis. While the station suffered heavy damage during the Klingon attack, repairs are well ahead of schedule and life on the station is beginning to return to normal, leaving me with one final piece of unfinished business. As the Klingons retreat and the Venture arrives, life on the station returns to normal. Quark reopens the bar, much to the delight of Morn, and Garrick returns to his tailor shop. As Worf packs up his belongings, Sisko arrives with his discharge papers. Wants to look them over before he sends them to Starfleet and makes his resignation official. Sisko tells Worf that he also considered leaving Starfleet after the death of his wife, believing that, once he took off the uniform, the pain would go away. But he soon realized that the pain would only end up catching up to him, and the only way he could beat it was to stand his ground and face it. In the end, he knows what he is and what he always will be, a Starfleet officer. Worf finally realizes that resigning from Starfleet won't help him move on from the destruction of the Enterprise, and decides to stay in the service. Sisko offers to speak with Captain of the Venture to see if he has a position for him. Worf, however, instead requested posting on Deep Space Nine. Worf later reports for duty in Ops, taking the post of Strategic Operations Officer and wearing a red Starfleet uniform. The rest of the senior staff congratulate him on his new posting. As Worf confides to O'Brien, he looks forward to new challenges in the Command Division. Sisko reports that Dukat and the rest of the Departed Council returned to Cardassia Prime safely and have said thanks, although everyone knows that Dukat will end up taking most of the credit. The news is not good at all, however, as the Klingons are continuing to remain near DS9. They have refused to abandon several Cardassian colonies they seized and have started fortifying their positions. Sisko tells his crew that they won't be backing down, but will be staying right where they are, aboard Deep Space Nine. Oh yeah. Alright, now let's take a look at some continuity surrounding this episode. This episode contains many references to other episodes of Deep Space Nine as well as Star Trek The Next Generation. This episode follows on from the revelation in the 3rd season finale, The Adversary, that the Founders have infiltrated the Alpha Quadrant. Garrick and Odo having breakfast together, something that Odo suggested they should do in the 3rd season episode The Die is Cast. There are numerous references to the destruction of the Obsidian Order. The Order was destroyed in the Battle of the Omarion Nebula, which also occurred in the 3rd season episode The Die is Cast. Sisko's reference to having once considered resigning from Starfleet is a callback to DS9's pilot episode, Emissary. Sisko claims that the communications array in the Gamma Quadrant hasn't detected any Dominion ship movements near the wormhole, as a reference to the 3rd season episode Destiny, in which the communications array is deployed. This is the first episode where Sisko is bald, a look that he maintained for the remainder of the series. This episode marks the first appearance of Worf's Mek'leth, his personal bladed weapon, something Michael Dorn had specifically requested upon joining the series. It would reappear in several future episodes as well as Star Trek First Contact. It is later revealed in Apocalypse Rising and further elaborated in Purgatory's Shadow that Martok was a changeling during the time that this episode is set. However, Martok cut his hand early in this episode and clearly bleeds, which usually indicate that the person isn't a changeling. This suggests that the changelings have found a way around the test. This is likely when one considers that this is a popular ritual for Klingons, and the possibility of changing infiltration would only stand to encourage the practice. Hence, to ensure infiltration, the changelings would absolutely have to find a way around it. On the other hand, the Martok changeling may have specifically chosen his palm to cut, as he may have been hiding a blood pack in that area of his humanoid shape. In fact, in the episode Homefront, when the Federation implements similar screens on Earth, Cisco's father is able to suggest off the top of his head a method by which this could easily be accomplished by a resourceful changeling. The various mentions of destruction of the USS Enterprise D refer to the film Star Trek Generations. The Cardassian dissident movement, which takes over control of Cardassia Prime and the Central Command, was first introduced in the second season episode Profit and Loss, while was shown to be gaining momentum in the third season episode Second Skin. O'Brien and Worf's conversation about saving Jean-Luc Picard from the Borg is a reference to the TNG episode The Best of Both Worlds Part 2. During the conversation between Worf and O'Brien at Quark's, the latter mentions the holodecks not working right. This is a reference to the episodes The Big Goodbye and Elementary Dear Data. Two other holodeck Havoc episodes were Ship in a Bottle and Emergence, neither of which Chief O'Brien was present for. When Bashir points out to Cisco that they aren't supposed to be using the cloaking device in the Alpha Quadrant, it's a reference to the episodes The Search Part 1, where the cloaking device was introduced, and Defiant, when the rule about not using the Alpha Quadrant was revealed. The animosity between Garak and Dukat, which is seen several times throughout the episode, was first alluded to in the second season episode Cardassians, and again in the third season episode Civil Defense. When the Klingons scan Deep Space Nine after Cisco refuses to turn over the Depata Council, the weapons Starfleet had installed are dismissed by General Martok as duranium shadows and Thoron fields. In reference to DS9 Emissary, where Kira and O'Brien used duranium shadows and Thoron fields to mask the lack of weapons on the station from several Cardassian ships. Chancellor Garrow's restoration of Worf's family honor took place in the TNG episode Redemption Part 2. Quark comments that Worf drinks only prune juice, a reference to yesterday's Enterprise. Cisco's line of dialogue in this episode about the Defiant looks like we're going to find out just how much of a padding the ship can take. Was later homage to in Enterprise Twilight. In that episode, Charles Tucker III, commanding officer of the Enterprise NX-01 in alternate timeline, states, "I think we're going to find how much of a beating these new shields can take." Okay. Cisco waits to have the weapons reactivated until the Klingons have already attacked, then orders the weapons to be fired in volleys, begin with even-numbered photon launchers, then odd-numbered ones, then phasers. At that point, he tries to hail Gowron, hoping that the display of the station's firepower and the destruction of several Klingon ships will be enough to get them to call off the attack, but the Klingons ignore their hail. Only then does he finally order all weapons to fire at will. In Call to Arms, when faced with a similarly massive assault on the station, it is shown that Cisco uses a very different strategy to defend against the Dominion. The weapons array is already activated when the Dominion attacks, and orders all weapons to fire immediately, presumably because, unlike with the Klingons, he isn't harboring hope of resolving the battle with any kind of diplomacy. Where previously wore a red command division uniform through the first season of The Next Generation, while he served as a junior command officer, but he switched to gold in the operations division when he became the head of security on the Enterprise in the second season. Near the end of this episode, Worf transfers back to the command division, becoming DS9's new strategic operations officer and the Defiant's executive officer, and again dons a red uniform. Quark mentions that his cousin Gala sells weapons. This was the basis of the fifth season episode Business as Usual, where Gala, played by Judge Page, appears. Gala also appears in the season 6 episode The Magnificent Ferengi. In scene at Quark's bar, Worf begins to fight with Drex, son of General Martok, by striking Drex with the back of his hand. In Apocalypse Rising, Worf explains that striking Klingon with the back of your hand is a challenge to a fight to the death. The new Tier 590 Medical Tricor X appears for the first time in this episode, after the new regular tricorder had already been introduced in the Voyager episode in Initiations. Worf's claim to Dax that he has even tried to contact Emperor Kalis is a reference to the TNG episode Rightful Heir, which a clone of the historical Kalis is installed as a kind of spiritual advisor for the Klingon populace. We previously visited DS9, Deep Space Nine, in Next Generation Birthright Part 1. In this episode, while on the bridge of the Defiant, Worf comments that he's never been on a Federation ship with a cloaking device. However, in the Next Generation episode, The Pegasus, it was aboard the Enterprise D as it engaged an experimental cloaking device. The Klingon drinking song, Established Your Rank, can also be heard in 2 Star Trek Voyager episodes, The Doctor instead of 9, singing in Barge of the Dead. Inuk sings the song's first 2 lines in Prophecy. I knew that. So overall, it's the first episode of Deep Space Nine Season 4. This episode is really, really good, and it's definitely packed with a whole lot of action, stuff like that, and yeah. However, the dissolvement of the Federation Cloaking Alliance is a pretty sad thing to see happen stuff, so yeah. But who knows, eventually, maybe things will get back, But hopefully, who knows, things might get better between the 2 parties eventually, so yeah. So overall, I give The Way of the Warrior 5 warp cores out of 5. Anyway, tune in a little bit after I get this episode uploaded as we take a look at the next episode, The Visitor. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.